And one reason you might want to make a human hibernate is if you wanted to send them on a long-term deep space mission.
Velkommen til Alumini, en podcast fra UiT, Norges arktiske universitet. Hos oss får du foredrag og intervju med våre forskere, rett på øret, der og når du måtte ønske. Hva er egentlig dvale, og hvordan kan det gjøre oss både slankere og klare for å reise til Mars? Nå skal du få møte en av de som jobber med å finne svaret. Shona Wood, you are an assistant professor?
Associate.
Associate,
professor
okay.
would be the English.
Førsteamanuensis, as we call it.
Yeah, Førsteamanuensis, yeah.
Who are you?
So I suppose I'm from Britain, which you can probably hear from my voice. I'm a biologist, and I moved to Tromsø 6 years ago to start my own research group looking at seasonal rhythms and hibernation.
Yeah, and you're a chronobiologist.
Yeah, chronobiologist is the technical term for what I am, yeah.
And what is that?
Chrono just is basically Latin for time. So it just means that I'm a biologist who's interested in how animals perceive time of day and time of year and how they can adapt their bodies to cope with that.
Okay. And being here gives you interesting results, I would imagine.
Yeah, the main reason I wanted to move here was because of the extreme seasonal environment and the very extreme light-dark cycles.
And you're here today to talk about hibernation specifically.
Yes.
What is that and how does it work?
So hibernation is basically an energy-saving strategy that animals use at certain times of year. So when it gets cold and it's winter and there's not a lot of food available, they basically turn down their requirements. It's like lowering down all of the needs that they have so they don't have to eat as much or don't have to use as much energy.
But there are differences in this, right? There are degrees of hibernation.
Yeah, so technically you can split it up into metabolic suppression, which is just ever so slightly lowering what your metabolic needs are, which usually something like a bear would do this. So it does a metabolic suppression. It doesn't necessarily lower its body temperature, but it saves a lot of energy. Also, sleep is metabolic suppression. That's where the misunderstanding that sleep and hibernation are the same thing comes from, is because we sleep in order to suppress our metabolism to save energy. But hibernation is a different process. It's not regulated in the same way as sleep.
And just to bring back the bears, they are known as the hibernation animal in Norway. But they don't actually hibernate, is that true?
No, it's technically more of just a metabolic suppression. So it's more like an extended sleep. That's more like sleep than normal hibernation is.
Winter sleep.
A winter sleep, yeah.
And they also wake up a bit, don't they?
Yes, they do, yeah. They sort of they lower their metabolism by about 75%. And they sort of keep themselves around 34 degrees C. So a normal mammal would be 37 degrees C. So it only lowers its body temperature a little bit. And they will get up and move around and do other things. But they've got some really amazing systems to keep their muscles working because they don't do enough exercise to keep their muscles working. So they've got some really nice... they recycle their own waste in order to make muscle mass, for example.
That sounds really disgusting.
Yeah.
Tell me more about that.
Well, just basically while these animals are in their hibernacula, that's what we call like the place where animals hibernate, even though technically bears don't hibernate. They will produce obviously urine and waste products because all of our cells and all of our bodies constantly producing waste products. It'll be at a lower rate because the metabolism is lower, but what they do, instead of these waste products, which we call urea, they actually take this and recycle it to make proteins to grow them up, keep their muscles at a proper size rather than the muscles wasting. So there's a lot of interest in that area for patients who are bedbound and have muscle wasting diseases, and whether there's a way you can use that mechanism to improve muscle mass.
Nice. But then we also have what we could call proper hibernation.
Yeah.
What's the difference?
So more true hibernation is usually seen in small rodents. And this is actually where there's a seasonal preparation in order to be able to do this. So the animal has to adjust its body. And then what it does is it starts to do something called torpor arousal cycling, which is where it drops its body temperature and its metabolic rate right down. So in the animal I work in, the golden hamster, its body temperature will get to 8 degrees C from 37. But there are other animals, such as the Arctic ground squirrel, which is in Alaska, and that can actually get its body temperature to 0 degrees C.
Wow.
Yeah. And by doing that, it's saving itself a huge amount of energy. And it stays in that state, and we call that state torpor. It stays in that state for... An Arctic ground squirrel can do it for nearly 2 weeks. A golden hamster does it for about 3 days. Okay. And then what they do is they warm themselves back up again, and they move around a little bit. In the case of the golden hamster, they might have a little bit of food. The Arctic ground squirrel won't eat. It will just go back down into torpor again, stay cold, and then keep going through these cycles of torpor and arousal. So it'll go through these cycles of torpor and arousal, and then we don't know how, but the animal knows when the end of winter is, because actually it's in the hibernacula. The temperature of the hibernacula doesn't really vary very much, so it's not a temperature cue. They must have some sort of internal sense of what time of year it is. They stop doing torpor arousal cycling, and they come out of the burrow, and they go on and reproduce and have a summer lifestyle.
That sounds pretty wild. How?
So how is the big question. And also why? I mean, obviously, why is obvious because the animal can save energy over winter. But actually, if you thought about it, when I told you about torpor arousal cycling, the animal's getting very cold, then getting itself really warm, then going really cold. That takes a lot of energy to do, and we don't understand why the animal has to warm up. People have hypothesized that it might be because they need to clear out waste products, or maybe it's because of the long period of cold that they experience in their body. Mammals shouldn't be at 8 degrees C. Our cells don't work properly, so maybe it's something to do with that. So there's that whole mystery. And then there's the how mystery, which is unresolved. We think the mechanism is inside the brain. And the way that the animal rewarms itself is using something called brown adipose tissue, which is a specialized kind of fat that has lots of mitochondria, which are the powerhouses of the cell. And these mitochondria are special mitochondria because they can produce lots of heat. Most of the time, mitochondria produce energy in the form of ATP, which is what our cells need to keep working. But actually, in brown adipose tissue, mitochondria produce lots and lots of heat, which allows the animal to warm up. So, and they think that there is a link. The brain controls the brown fat, basically. And so it must be that the how is in the brain.
Exactly. And this is where your research is at the moment.
Yes. Yeah. So I work in the brain, and a special part of the brain called the hypothalamus, which is the control center of the brain. It controls how you grow, how much you eat, how you use your energy. So it's really the control desk for your body.
Yeah, and this is a common structure in all mammal brains.
Yes. In fact, all vertebrate brains.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you have a suspicion about a specific kind of cells in the hypothalamus. Is that correct?
Yeah, so there's a specialized cell type in this hypothalamus, and one of the things that we get taught about the brain is that the brain shouldn't have blood in it. It's kind of isolated from the rest of the body. But actually, there are areas within the brain, and there's an area in the hypothalamus, where the brain can connect with the rest of the body, either through blood or something called cerebral spinal fluid, which is basically the fluid we have in our brain just to keep everything functioning. And that's actually the connection of the brain with the rest of the body. So the rest of the body can signal back through these fluids to certain areas. And hypothalamus is one of the areas that can happen, but only in certain ventricles, spaces within the brain can that happen. And there's a certain cell type that lines these ventricles and spaces, which are called tanocytes, which we think is receiving these signals and then telling the brain and the neurons, the specialized part of the brain that does all of the work, what to do. So that's the theory.
Okay, so sort of a communication exchange between the body and the brain.
Yep.
And through that, the brain gives feedback to the body and tells the body to warm up or go to sleep or hibernate.
That's the theory. We don't know, and we're trying to work that one out, if that is what's happening. It would seem likely because these cells are basically, as you say, the connection, the hub between the brain and the rest of the body, and they can be transmitting information to the brain to tell it what to then tell the rest of the body to do. So it's we call it a feedback loop.
And how do you go around researching this? What's the process?
The process. So first of all, we need to bring, we've chosen to work on golden hamsters. These are your normal pet hamster. Quite a lot of people listening may have one of these hamsters. And we use those because they're very easily available and they're tame, easy to use. Any other alternatives would require us to go out into the wild and catch wild animals and then try and bring them into the lab, which would be very stressful.
And bears are so messy as well.
You need quite a lot of space for bears too. Yeah. So, I think the golden hamster's a nice compromise. And then what we have to do is we have to actually change the light conditions because these animals can't do hibernation unless they think it's going to be winter. So we do this by bringing them in and giving them like summer lighting, and then we switch them onto winter lighting. We don't change the temperature at this point, we just switch them onto winter lighting, and we let them stay there for a few weeks, and in that time they're doing a lot of changes to their body. They're growing more brown fat, they're changing their fat metabolism, they're changing their brain, preparing for winter. And then what we do is we turn the temperature down and then we wait. And then they start to show us that they can do these torpor arousal cycles. But we need a lot of devices to be able to actually measure this. So we put in temperature sensing probes into basically the stomach, near the stomach area. Mm-hmm. And we also put one on the brown adipose tissue, which is found at the back of the neck. So we put these temperature sensing probes in, and we have cameras, and so we can watch the thermal imaging, and we monitor these animals and wait for them to start to hibernate. And once they do, we sample them at certain points, and then we have to sample their brain, and we can do a few different things with that. We try to isolate these cells and look at what genes and what characteristics that they're giving off these cells to try and work out how they're working and how they're changing during hibernation. And then we can also take them and look at their mitochondria. We can also sample this cerebral spinal fluid I was telling you about as well, to understand what the feedback to the brain is going to be.
Exactly. It's fascinating and complicated.
Lots of work. Probably too complicated.
But this is basic research, right?
Yes.
But I've heard that there are potential applied uses of this research that can be very good for humans.
Yeah, so one of the amazing things about these animals is when I explained the torpor arousal cycling, I said to you that they get their body temperature down to 8 degrees C and then they warm themselves up again. Actually, they do this over a 2 or 3 hour period, and it's like they're doing the equivalent of a marathon or something. Their heart rate is really high, they're breathing really fast, all the blood is rushing around their body, and they're rewarming and reperfusing themselves. And there's something that can happen to humans that have either fallen into cold water or have had a stroke, and that's called reperfusion injury. And this is basically where humans can have brain damage from all the blood rushing in too quickly.
You get warmed up too quickly.
Yeah.
No, cold blood gets into your body or distributed around in your body too quickly.
Yeah. So, and that can cause a lot of problems, and that can be a problem in long duration surgery, and it can also be a problem, if you have a stroke or various other things. So they think that these hamsters have a special protective mechanism to stop that reperfusion injury occurring. So if we could understand how they're tolerating going through torpor arousal cycling, we might have some insights into the biomedical application.
Could there also be insights into metabolism and how human metabolism work? And
yes, so there's the other side of it as well, is what the whole purpose of this mechanism is how to turn down metabolism and save energy. So if we understand how the brain turns metabolism on or off properly, we might actually be able to understand how we could turn the metabolism up to lose weight.
Exactly.
Or there are obviously some diseases which people are burning energy too fast as well, in which case you might want to turn the metabolism down.
And then there's the science fiction thing.
Yes.
What is that?
So the big science fiction thing is, maybe this is part of the reason I work on hibernation. I'm a bit of a Star Trek fan. It's the idea of human hibernation. Can we make humans hibernate? And one reason you might want to make a human hibernate is if you wanted to send them on a long-term deep space mission. Because obviously you want to go into a long-term deep space mission, or even if you wanted to go for a very long trip.
Just going to Mars.
You would need to take a huge amount of food, and it would take a long, long time.
You get bored silly.
Yes. So can we use hibernation as a way to allow humans to explore space?
So if we can, it's equivalent to deep sleep and all of the stuff we've seen in science fiction movies. Yeah. Alien and
I think though in the case of like in Alien, for example, and I think in humans, the likelihood is it would be more of a bear-like hibernation because we're quite big, so it's hard for us to shed a lot of heat. So you might just be able to work on the metabolism part of it rather than the body temperature part of it.
At least it's something. It's somewhere. Yeah. This is very exciting, and the European Union thinks so as well, because you've gotten a big grant to explore this further.
Yeah, I was really lucky to be awarded an ERC Consolidator grant. The project started last month. So quite exciting, quite a lot of money and quite a lot of work to do.
Big things coming.
Yes.
Okay, well, best of luck to you. Shona Wood, thank you for coming.
Thank you very much.